Darren here, reflecting today on the age-old dilemma of quality versus quantity. Namely, 10 bands who only managed a single studio album. The one and dones who, for whatever reason, musical differences, tragedy, bad timing, a restless nature, just couldn't keep it up. None of the usuals here, alternative left field artists as ever, but no Pistols, Buckley, Modern Lovers, Lars, Minor Threat, etc. These are the obscurer, more interesting acts, to me at least, ranging from the quietly influential to the bordering on forgotten. Live albums, EPs and posthumous releases do not count, and I've tried to place these in rough order of increasing obscurity, so watch along, see if you agree with my ranking. First up then, a bona fide post-punk classic which you really ought to know. At 1. This is Colossal Youth by Young Marble Giants. If post-punk heralded the sweeping of the pieces from the game board, a fresh start, then it could be argued that Colossal Youth embodies this principle better than many of its more fated peers. A wispy, minimalist presentation with no trace of punk's abrasive snottiness. The most cursory of primitive beatbox backings, clicky, muted guitar figures, bingo hall keyboards, bright, clangy bass, and Alison Stratton's distracted, underplayed vocals. The clearer, clipped sounds recall the futurist instrumental pop of Joe Meek, or of intermission or test pattern music on a snowy old TV set. The lyrics, however, they flash and flare up through Alison's bored housewife act, prickly and accusatory on Include Me Out, and bitterly cynical on Credit in the Straight World. For an influential band, an influential record, Cobain was a huge fan. There has never been anything else quite like Colossal Youth. Its toy-town prettiness is almost incidental, that exposed workings barely treated. It's not proto anything, dream pop, slowcore, jangle pop. It just seems to exist in a pocket dimension formed by its own bloody-minded refusal to be expansive in any way. A quite perfect record, a document of a band capturing their ideas without fear or intervention within a very short period of activity. They were gone within a year of its release. Sticking with short-lived first wave post-punk at number 2, I've got The Only Fun in Town by Josef K. A 1981 re-recording of the never-released Sorry for Laughing LP. The band, mortified by the flat sound they'd rendered first time out, reconvened and nailed it in a short 2-day session within a matter of months. It's that funky disco-inflected postcard record sound, think Orange Juice, but with a starker, colder edge suggesting a less insular Joy Division, and a rubbery twitchiness akin to the percussive aggro of fellow Scots, the Fire Engines. Also, a kissing cousin to the Bunnymen's Crocodiles, maybe? I don't know. But the scratchy rawness is pure DIY pop circa 81 and a clear influence on the indie cassette culture that would surface later that decade. Think bands like June Brides, Close Lobsters, The Wedding Present. Years later, post-punk revival acts like Franz Ferdinand would routinely lionize Josef K while simultaneously sanding back those jagged edges that were integral to the original's charm. A whiskey analogy, if you like. Franz Ferdinand are the blended variety, whereas Josef K were the single malt. Rewind back to 81 if I were you, and have yourself a wee swally. At 3, from 2001, Lift to Experience and the Texas Jerusalem Crossroads. It's a dream pop post-rock concept album by a band whose trajectory would have seen them, I think, cross over in a big way were it not for an accumulation of stuff. Money problems, the whole state of the world circa 9/11, and finally the death by accidental overdose of bass player Josh Browning's wife. All too much to ride out. They split before the year's end. The album's a big piece of work with a big sound. The vocals have a little Buckley about them, and there's a touch of spiritualized, gospel-tinged heft surrounding it too. Some not so subtle religious subtext in there, but it works in a conceptual sense, never coming across like a Christian rock Loveless or anything. They have reformed over the last 10 years, but as of 2025, this is still their only studio album. Skipping back a little at 4, all the way to 1994, it's Rusty by Rodan. The band that seeded a whole new branch of the post-rock family tree. Rusty is an awesome record. Yes, they had a lot in common with Louisville legends Slint, but the filigree inlay and controlled dynamics of Spiderland in Rodan's hands are pushed into high contrast. The Faulkner and Melville allusions of Slint given the graphic novel treatment by Rodan, a sharper, screen-printed aesthetic, tougher, tighter, more garish. The dynamic swings feel bigger, the jolts fiercer, wilder. Their shared post-hardcore legacy is unmistakable, but compare the sleeves, the blurred, monochrome, shadowy autobiography of Spiderland, the saturated moth close-up of Rusty. The feel is everything here. I was lucky enough to see them tour this record in 94, but by 95 they'd splintered into a myriad of fascinating new side projects, making Rusty both a fascinating document of the evolving post-hardcore sound and a breadcrumb on the trail to countless further recordings by its individual members. Next, another band I caught live during their short tenure, but, well, I'll explain in a bit. At 5, this is Life Without Buildings and Any Other City from 2001. Forming in Glasgow circa 99, Life Without Buildings were a 4-piece whose unique selling point was the distinctive sprechgesang vocal style of Sue Tompkins. A rippling, melodic art rock backbone was thrown into stark contrast by the effusively poetic babble sprayed over it by Sue. Comparisons, historically, Ari Up of the Slits maybe. Contemporaneously, Linda Steelyard of Prolapse. Latterly, Florence Shaw of Dry Cleaning. And the reason for my reticence in enthusing about their live show, well, I picked the one date where Sue had been struck down with illness on the day of the gig, meaning I got to see a purely instrumental version of Life Without Buildings, which entirely misses the point of their existence. Nonetheless, fans of other sung-spoke acts will find lots to love here. I'm thinking Blue Aeroplanes, the Van Pelt, Blumfeld. Tracks like Lean Over, Newtown, Young Offenders are bustling, fidgety, tuneful concoctions given an entirely new complexion by the non-stop commentary. Any Other City and the band bubbled up to the cultural surface again during the pandemic when a TikTok trend of young ladies miming along to the Lean Over went, if you'll pardon the COVID pun, viral. Whatever it takes, I say. If the chronically short of attention span thing introduces Life Without Buildings to a new generation of listeners, then hooray for TikTok. And yes, that actually pains me to say it out loud. Midpoint. Are these getting particularly obscure? Only you can judge that. But if you're sticking with me for the next 5, do think about liking this video. And why not subscribe to if you're new to Decelany? Depending on your age, my pick at 6 could maybe have done with appearing a little earlier, but what can I say? It's a fine line. This is Cap'n Jazz and Shmap'n Shmazz, or to give it its full title, well, I'm not going to do that. It'll be scrolling across the bottom. Read it for yourself. Yeah, welcome to Midwest Emo, aka What Emo Did Next. One of those subgenres that's developed legs well into the new millennium thanks to the continuing and mystifying pop punk thing and the myth-building power of social media and memeology. It's post-hardcore, first-gen style. Think Fugazi, Jawbreaker, Jawbox, or something else probably. But given an indie/math rock makeover and reveling in the awkward teenage heart-on-sleeve lyrical angle. And Cap'n Jazz are probably the Midwest emo wellspring. Members went on to roles in American Football, The Promise Ring, others. And this is their lone studio album from 1995. It's a record I understand, but don't get. It clears my influential bar with ease, so it has to be here. But this wasn't my emo, and it never will be. Give Puddle Splashers or Basil's Kite a listen and see for yourself. The more of your teens that you lived during the 90s will probably be the deciding factor in how you feel or respond to Cap'n Jazz. The intoxicating youthfulness of it is its secret weapon. Tight margins again here at 7. Another album generally considered emo, but being a purer DC schooled affair, much more my thing. From 1997, Regulator Watts and the Aesthetics of No Drag. One of the short-lived bands that rose from the ashes of Discord legends, and very nearly a one and done themselves, Hoover, whose 1994 album, The Lurid Traversal of Route 7, has featured on Decelany previously. Fred Erskine and Joe McRedmond instigated the Crown Hate Ruin, whilst guitarist and singer Alex Dunham formed Regulator Watts. Both of those bands are in fact one and dones, but I'm far more drawn to Regulator Watts' atmospheric compositions. Until the Eagle Grins from Crown Hate doubles down on the screamier, pummeling side of the Hoover coin, and whilst it's a good record, it just doesn't pull me in the same way that No Drag does. I love Dunham's way with the guitar. He can do the crushing riff thing, but is just as likely to pivot into epic, reverbed soundscape territory. The transition from Candy Bullet O into Seed Tick East, illustrating this broader palette perfectly. I'd probably even go so far as to say it gives Lurid Traversal a pretty good run for its money in pure album stakes. Like that record, it ebbs and flows beautifully, building to a rabid climax. The faltering, mumbled Firecracker Jack Tippy bleeding into Halifax Hellbound before blazing out in the incendiary hail of Witch Duck. A fabulous record. Discord still have it available via Bandcamp, but Regulator Watts' place on this list may be short-lived. New stuff is apparently imminent after a going-on for 30-year gap. The 8th entry, I've got Camberwell Now and The Ghost Trade. Yeah, your easiest route to this is via the 1992 full Discog compilation All's Well. Again, Bandcamp is your friend, although I do see original vinyl copies of the standalone LP surface in the usual places. The continuity project of Charles Haywood and Trevor Gronwy of this heat following that band's dissolution in 1982. Few EPs and this album released in 1986, and well, that's your lot. And it's a uniformly excellent little back catalogue, with Ghost Trade being maybe the pick of it. Yeah, it sits right on the fault line between Canterbury prog and Agit post-punk. The combination of Haywood's serpentine drums, a melodic bass guitar, folky multi-track vocals, and a head-spinning array of found sound and field recordings makes for a truly unique listening experience. It's this heat, but with a heightened lyrical and thematic presence and a stunning rhythmic propulsion that pins you back into your seat. Working Nights is a bruising high point. The cut-up vocal samples of speculative fiction descend into a dizzying, nightmarish nursery rhyme, and Green Lantern's skipping, breathless drum clatter is a masterclass. Yeah, Haywood's an unbelievable drummer, and Camberwell Now, an incredible showcase for both that and his pungent, doomy lyricism. Moving on at 9 then to grapple with the thorny question of when does post-punk become new wave? There's a dividing line in there somewhere, and this entry's sheer quirk factor pushes it over the edge and squarely into new wave. Yeah, from 1981, this is the self-titled album by Suburban Lawns. Devo weirdness, B-52's vocals gone awry, surreal lyrics, a performance art happening, LA punk style. And that just about covers it on a first pass, I guess. It has the feel of a whole album full of the crazy numbers you'd get snatches of from 80s LA movie soundtracks. Think, Ridgemont High, Valley Girl, Night of the Comet, The Terminator even. I'm trying to avoid that Q word, quirky, over and over here, but I can't. Sue Tissue's vocals go from deep comedy lady voice to squealing Yoko dolphin song in the space of a few bars. The single here, Janitor, being the perfect self-contained example. They flashed brief and hard at the dawn of the 80s. Jonathan Deme's video for Gidget Goes to Hell got them on SNL. But at the same time, they kind of missed the boat with the whole, very new at the time, MTV thing. Yeah, a real band of contradictions. LA Cool, signed to IRS, bagging some big support gigs in their day, The Clash for one, but never comfortable with the level of scrutiny that this brought them. A follow-up EP in 83, and that was it. Gone, and in a lot of ways, forgotten. 40 plus years later, they get the odd retrospective feature, but that's it. The quintessential oddball 80s new wavers trapped in amber. So, to close then, what should be the most obscure record and band on this list? I've got at 10, Navigator and Nostalgie. Straight out of Norwich, my hometown, and alumni of my old university. That's UEA. Nostalgie was recorded 97, released 98, following a string of singles and EPs on Norwich's Noisebox label. This one's called Assay. All of those earlier recordings were helpfully compiled last year via Flame is Slow, a compilation on Wrong Speed Records, but as far as I'm aware, Nostalgie has never been given the reissue treatment. So, mid-90s, the band had, with encouragement from Mogwai, followed their experimental instincts into a far more improvisatory space. Environmental recordings, minimalism, bordering on ambience. And that sound, their final kind of evolution, is writ large across Nostalgie. I saw them play many times. They were friends of friends, and word was that they'd gone full mic placement crazy during their sessions at Purple Studios in Norwich, and the hapless engineers were accommodating them to the best of their abilities. In the absence of any other feasible way of hearing this record, there's a link above to a helpful rip of it from here on YouTube. Please have at it. Fans of David Payo, Stars of the Lid, Hood, etc. will recognise this particular hue of post-rock sound. It may not be everyday listening, but these guys were serious about what they were doing and are well worthy of your late-in-the-day interest. And with that, I'm off to get fleeced for a dog-eared copy of Nostalgie on CD from an Italian seller on Discogs, which will no doubt never turn up. The lesson? Yeah, it's the one-offs you pass on that will haunt you. Don't be like Darren. Keep it physical. You'll be glad one day. So there you go, 10 Obscura, one and dones. Yeah, let me know what you think. I'm sure you've got your own ideas. Pitch in down below and we can have a chat about it. If you've got this far into the video, thanks ever so much for sticking with it. I hope you've enjoyed it, and yeah, I hope you'll come back and visit me again soon. But until then, take care and bye for now.